All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today we have Eric Butorac on. Eric, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Will.
Thanks for being here. And I wanted to start today with your TED Talk, which you did a few years back. I actually just watched it a couple of weeks ago, which is why I reached out. And in the talk, you talked about your path to becoming a professional tennis player. You were on tour for a number of years, and you played college tennis at the D3 level, which is probably the only thing we have in common as far as tennis achievements. And almost, I don't know, has anyone ever made it from D3 to the pro level?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of guys. Bud Schultz is one, sort of like a mentor friend of mine. He played at Bates College. He's now in his 50s, so it was a little bit earlier, and he got to actually, I think, top 50 in the world. So in singles, different era, obviously, but another guy and a very, very close friend / mentor of mine. But yeah, and there's been a few others along the way, maybe not quite as high as I made it, but you know, there's a few. Yeah.
So you can probably count them on one or two hands.
Yeah.
So your TED Talk, I guess start by just telling us the story of like how the TED Talk got started, what inspired it, and then you really focused a lot on how you were able to improve from D3 player to top 20 in the world in doubles. So kind of take us through that a little bit if you can.
Sure. So the TED Talk was a little bit sort of dumb luck. I was actually just fresh into my USTA job, and someone who was putting on the conference just cold called me and said they had seen me speak at a tennis showcase many years ago and thought I'd be the right fit. And I sort of took the opportunity, and once I committed to it, then I really wanted to do a good job with it, and put in some real thought into kind of what message I wanted to put out there, because I knew I had an interesting story. I knew there's a lot of people that when I spoke to, D3 tennis players, younger high school players, like my story really resonated. And I've always thought about like, oh, it'd be cool to write a book someday. But, what 17-year-old is picking up like a hardcover, novel, or not novel, hardcover autobiography
Right.
from a bookstore. So I thought, okay, cool. This is my chance to really sort of share my story. But it was an awesome experience. I mean, it's sort of a whole weekend. You get to meet the other speakers. You get one practice run through on the red carpet where I literally forgot not a quarter of my talk. Rewrote the whole thing the night before almost. The guy who used to be my agent on tour, was with me, and he heard me speaking, and I was trying to really force something down, and he kept saying, "No, man, just sort of speak from your heart and tell your story, and the story is there." And that really helped me. So I literally kind of rewrote most of the speech, the morning of, but it came out great. And again, I think sometimes when you're sharing your story, you're not really allowed any notes when you do a TED Talk. So you could have a PowerPoint if you want, but I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to show charts or graphs or anything. So I really did. I just tried to dove into the emotions of what it's like to basically go from, small town Minnesota, Division III tennis, to, playing Grand Slams for a decade, and things like the Player Council, and just tried to kind of share what that experience was like, and hopefully motivates people to go out and try things. I'm not a risk taker by nature, but obviously going and, moving to France when I finished playing tennis at Gustavus, was a huge leap. Or I never really left the country before that, and I'm picking up my bags and going to play money tournaments in France. That was a huge leap, and so many points along the way where I ran out of money multiple times and kept wanting to quit and come home, and people would sort of urge me on, or I'd get a little bit of funding from a sponsor or my parents or different people to kind of help me out along the way, and ultimately just kept getting better, right? And that was sort of what I talked to when a lot of guys on the lower ranks of the tour will communicate with me now, right? So some of the doubles guys, especially the names you might see, like Alex Lawson, Rob Galloway, Nate Lamons, Hunter Reese, Pasha Schnurr, these guys. And I communicate with them a lot and text them, and they want to know kind of what the journey's all about. And my message to them all the time is just like, keep improving, keep getting better. Like, because you're 25, 26, 27 years old, you can still keep getting better at tennis. And it's one of those
Right.
games that takes a long time to keep improving.
Right.
So you have to really invest and just be there, 6 days a week and just keep putting in the effort. And that was sort of what ultimately got me there.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, for the people who haven't seen the TED Talk, we'll link to it in the show notes, and they should definitely watch it. But you talk about your time, I think it was maybe your sophomore year in college when you went to nationals and you lost in the semifinals to Emory or something like that. And then from there, it seemed like things kind of changed. You started to set these daily goals. You did a lot of stuff like monitoring your heart rate and your breathing and things like that, which most of the people listening probably aren't going to do that. But talk about specifically what you did and what you changed to start improving more as a tennis player.
So I think to frame it all, what I had was sort of like just a really devastating moment. And that sort of set the stage, right? I was number one in the country. It was my junior year. We were number one team in the country. I was really expected to win our match against Emory. When you go into these college matches, you sort of like, all right, we should win at 1, 3, and 5, and get the doubles point. And you just kind of know, right? And I was I was one guy who should win. I was playing a freshman from Emory, Mark Odgers, a guy I'd beaten in the fall, or beaten in the indoors, but I had spent a lot of my spring season partying way too much and not focused on my tennis and not doing a great job. And I think ultimately the pain of losing that last match losing the breaker in the third to that, there was a lot of seniors on that team who should have won a national title, and it was all lined up for us. And I was the one who really lost it for us. So I think that when you go through that, then you're like, okay, that's sort of like a, welcome moment, or where it's like, what am I going to do now? Like, what's my response to this going to be? And it's still painful when I go back and think about it. And like, I wish I didn't go through it, because I feel so bad about what all happened, but also it sort of put me on a different path. Right. And I got much more focused about my tennis. I decided like, oh, I'm either going to do this or I'm not. And yeah, my coach was sort of the one who helped, kind of hold my hand through these daily goals. And we openly talked about some of the challenges. What are the challenges? All right, well, at my college on, I think it was, Tuesday and Thursday night, they have all these, different bar specials. And I was, all into going out, and that was a big night to go out. He's like, all right, well, if Tuesday and Thursday are the big nights out, let's set up an early morning practice on Wednesday and Friday with individual workout with my coach at 8 a.m.
Right.
So now it's like, okay, if I'm going to go out and have a drink, it's like, I know I'm going to be with my coach at 8 a.m. So I'm not going to go out and party late. It's like, it was helpful to have a coach that I could be really honest with as well, and be like, I know I have some talent. I really want to invest, but these are my struggles. And I'm realizing now too, like, I'm a person who's influenced by peer pressure. And so once I really learned that and embraced that, it's like, okay, now it becomes very important who you surround yourself with, right?
Right.
And making conscious choices and choosing, people on the team that might be lower ranked, but were really fit and really wanted to get in the gym, and people that were going to push me in sprints, or people that, and just surrounding myself with the right crowd.
Right.
So those were some of the things that helped early. And yeah, those daily goals. I mean, you hear it in a lot of different books, right? It's like, if you're not putting in the effort every single day, you can't just all of a sudden get to this great destination. And I got pretty good about enjoying the process of achieving those goals. I have a guy who worked for me at the US Open, Ben Shapiro is his name, another D3 tennis player. He's awesome. And he was talking, we were having a little like goal setting session, and he was like, we need to remember, we talk about learning from failures, but there's also an aspect of enjoying the successes. And there's something really cool about, all right, my goal yesterday was to start relearning the piano, right? And I want, because my 4-year-old seems interested, and I just need something to take my mind off work and kids and everything else. And so I'm going to play 5 minutes of piano a day, and just to get something small, right, to actually do it.
Right.
And I did it. And it's like, wow, I really celebrated the fact that I was able to do it. And now I can't wait to do it again today. And I think celebrating those wins, even though they're small, they can be 5 minutes. They can be, I'm going to spend 10 minutes today working on my serve, and that's an extra, I'm getting the basket out, and I'm going to have a specific plan of how I'm going to work on it. I'm going to complete that, check that box, and feel good about it. I think
Right.
that's really important too, because that's kind of how you build that foundation for like the really big stuff that everybody
Yeah.
talks about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one part of the talk that stuck out to me was when you talked about walking into Wimbledon for the first time, and I think you said it was 2007, and that's when like everybody around you said that, or you said that they thought you had made it,
Yeah.
but they didn't know that with all these small goals, you'd been making it every single day. And that part like almost gave me goosebumps. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, like he's really succeeding every day on a daily basis. And I feel like so many players, uh, and this is life, right? But so many players and so many people are thinking, oh, if I can get to this, then I'll be happy. Then I'll be there. Oh, if I can get
Yeah.
to this, then I'll be there. But instead, you were able to break it down to these like smaller tasks and really kind of appreciate on a daily basis. I did a really good job today
Mhm.
working on second serves or,
Mhm.
whatever that daily task might be.
And it helps to really love the game of tennis, right? Which I did. My
Sure.
dad's a tennis coach. He runs my parents run a small tennis club in Rochester, Minnesota. Like I grew up around the sport. So I truly, truly love it. And I think a lot of players on tour do. And that really helps, right? So it's like
Right.
and I say it, and there's a lot of truth to it. Like practicing on the practice courts at Wimbledon or on a random court with my two buddies in a small French town with no one watching. Like it really didn't change my effort that much. Like
Mm,
I was pretty much as excited to do one as I was the other. Like, yeah, one's got a little bit of a crowd and sure it's Wimbledon, it's cool. Of course it is. But like I was pretty much locked in the same way. And I see it now, like working at the Open, like a guy like Sasha Zverev, right? Just
mm,
loves to practice. And it's like
mm,
he's got 2 hours in the morning on Ash, and then he gets a little in the afternoon, and then like we're trying to literally close the site down, and so it's like one of the early practice days, and someone's hitting indoors, and I walk over to the indoor building, and Zverev's like hitting serves indoors at 8 o'clock at night,
wow.
and I'm just like, Sasha, dude, like we got to close, and like how much longer are you gonna go? Like but I also really respect that. Like I love
Sure.
that mentality because I had that myself too. It's like no, just like I'm gonna get every ounce of this, and I just want to be out here longer and more and keep working because there's so many different things to work on in the game of tennis,
Mhm.
right? All the different strokes and movement and rally situations and putting yourself in point play, and there's just like sort of an endless list.
Right.
And you get to a point as a pro where it's like, okay, you may be either limited by hours of court time. If you're at a pro tournament, especially in indoors, you might only get a couple hours of court time in a day, and that's including if
Mhm.
you go in early morning or late night. Or you're limited by like how much can your body really do, right? At a
Right.
high level of intensity with coaches on the court and stuff, you can only play so many hours of tennis when you're 30
Sure.
plus years old. So it's like, okay, now I got to be so smart about like what exactly am I going to work on today, and what are the little where can I make the biggest strides by changing this stroke or altering this or spending more time on that, because it all sort of comes at a cost.
Right.
But that's the stuff that I love, and it's like everyone talks about, oh, it's so cool you played Wimbledon or this or that. It's like, oh, but I was so caught up in like all the nuances of trying to improve,
Right.
and that was the stuff that I loved.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm on a different level, but I feel like I'm the same way. Every time I'm out on the court, I'm just like constantly thinking about like, okay, like next time I'm have a point in that situation, maybe I should be hitting the ball here instead of here. Maybe I should
Mhm.
be, hitting something a little heavier because it looks like they like the pace or whatever it might be. Um,
Totally, yeah.
so we've talked a lot about your improvement at the pro level. What can we take away for like club players? So if you're talking with like somebody who's like a 3.5 4 level club player who plays maybe twice a week for a couple hours or something like that, how can they take some of these principles and think about improvement when they don't have as much time or
Mhm.
maybe the skill set? Obviously they have other jobs to worry about.
Yeah, of course. So a couple things. I mean, like I always say it's a little bit of almost like an acquired skill is trying to be pretty mindful with every ball that you're hitting. And if I even think back about my own like college career, when you start like feeding a ball in the middle of the court and rallying with your partner, you're often thinking about the class you just had, the girl that you like, what party you're going to, and you're doing a lot of like mindless hitting. So the more that you can like truly like engage with like, how did that shot feel? Like, did I brush up on that backhand the way that I wanted to? Did I get around the ball the way I wanted to? Really like getting your mind sort of like locked in. I think you can improve a lot from the first few balls that you hit. Right? That's one really important thing. The other thing I like to talk about too is making sure you don't like practice only the same things. So for instance, in doubles, one thing I see if I go ever, help out someone who's a 3-5, 4-0 player, whatever, it's like, okay, how do I volley better? Right. And I'm like, show me what you do. All right, like come here and I practice my volleys. And the problem is like what I see is everyone practices volleys from the same position.
Right.
They're halfway between the service line and the net. They hit volleys for 5 minutes there. They hit a couple overheads, and then they expect to be able to hit a low first volley and on top of the net put away an awkward backhand over the shoulder volley. It's like they've never practiced those in their life, right? So just start to kind of move around the tennis court and find the different shots that you might have to hit, practice those, and understand kind of the nuances of all the different types of shots. So that's a couple things. And then the third thing I always say, especially as it relates to doubles, is just understanding the psychology of playing with another player on the court. And whether you're playing, platform tennis or in a golf scramble or whatever, like as someone's partner, you have such an ability to make that player play better or play worse on how you engage with them, on your body language, on your reactions to a good shot or a bad shot, and understanding, what makes them play well. And you can do that, even within the first few minutes of a match. Is it the person who wants a lot of energy or not a lot of energy? And I had to do that throughout my career and, learned a lot along the way. But it's like, ultimately, if you and I are going into to play a tennis match together, like I want you to bring your absolute best, because that's going to give us the best chance to win. And that's just selfish. So then my challenge is, how do I get the best out of you? And it's just amazing to watch the number of partners who, when you miss that big return on a break point, just like turn around and like walk to the bench, and I'm just like, oh my god,
shake like their head or something.
Like how could you, like your goal is to win the match, right? Like how could you ever, like you're actively doing something to make the team worse. So just kind of buying into that, and it's human nature, right? But you have to kind of like, no, what is the goal here, and how do we get there? So those are just a couple of things that I say often to people if they ever ask.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the time people are can tend to get more worried about it not being their own fault that they lose rather than winning the match, right? So but something else that you mentioned, so stepping on the practice court and kind of noticing what's happening. So for example, I've started playing a little more singles this year. So every time I'm out kind of rallying, I've been really focusing on depth, right? And you talked about hitting around the ball and seeing like how it feels and stuff like that. And one thing I've been trying to notice more is like, where's my ball landing in the court, right? So most balls will land around that service line area, maybe a little past it. I'm really trying to make sure that they're landing closer to the baseline. And it's, that's helped my doubles game a lot. So really, if people can notice where their ball's landing in the court and, focus on maybe depth or the angle volley, if that's what they're working on, that can help a lot as well.
One thing my coach, I work with this coach, best doubles coach in my opinion in the world, Louis Caille is his name, and he coached Jamie Murray for a long time, still does.
Get him on the show.
And so when I was playing with Jamie, Louis was our coach, and guy's brilliant. Coached many Grand Slam champions, but very analytical and tactical. And he had this thing called a pro ball, and we had to do baseline rallies, and we had to hit 10 pro balls in a row. And so a pro ball is a ball that is still rising when it reaches your opponent. Right. So if the ball bounces and then hits its apex and comes back down, that's what he was calling that. That's not a pro ball. So you need to hit 10. So like I hit, and you can get that by a number of ways. You can hit it very deep, so it lands close to the player and like bounces up into them. You can hit it with a lot of spin, so it hits the court and it's like bouncing aggressively up. You can hit it with so much pace, so it's still bouncing into the player. But if you hit a ball that is decelerating because it's reached its apex, that's not a ball that's considered a professional ball. So we'd have to get these rallies of like 10 in a row back and forth before he would move us on to the next exercise. But it was a really different gauge than just depth. And I was like, oh, I like that concept, because, you know, a
Yeah.
guy like Rafa might land his forehand shorter, but it's still bouncing up into the player so aggressively. And it's like, so you're not really worried about Rafa's depth because it still
Right.
has that pro ball to it. So,
Right. That's a good point.
yeah.
Yeah. His ball reaches its apex like in the first row or something, even though it lands at
Exactly.
the service line.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing you mentioned is working on things that like not working on the same thing in practice. So when you talked about Rafa, that reminded me, there's a blog post I wrote a few years ago. I'll link to it in the show notes as well. But I was watching the U.S. Open, and Rafa was playing, and Darren Cahill was doing some of the commentating, and he said, if you've ever watched Rafa practice, it's amazing how much he misses.
Mm-hmm.
And he said it's incredible because he's working on these shots that are low percentage to kind of expand his capabilities in tennis. And when I watch people go practice, they're trying to hit maybe 50 balls in a row or whatever, um, down the middle of the court or something like that. And really, to get better, we have to do things that we haven't previously done, right? So we have to be working on shots that we might not take that big a risk in a match, but we should be taking that big of a risk in
Mm-hmm.
practice to continue to improve.
It's a good point. I've never practiced with Rafa, but from the people who have hit with him, they said it is actually one of the most awful practices because he hits the ball. He over hits through the whole practice. So he'll literally, coach will feed it in. He'll hit it as hard as he can. It might go in, it might go in. You'll return it, and then he'll just tag the next one again. And it's just like, you can't even, it's like not how he plays. Yeah, he does. He actually over hits in maybe not all of his practices, but in a lot of the ones that I've seen. And that's a concept that I never really grasped during my pro career. I've only really thought about it after. I don't know that I heard the exact same Cahill comment that you did, but it's sort of like, I put that together with what some other players had said. And I was like, oh, you're right. Because in my career, I became too cautious under pressure that I think I would have done well to be over hitting through a lot of my practices, to be over serving in practice sets, when I get to a deuce point in a practice set, going big, because I know that in a match, I always kind of regress to a 75%, three-quarter, in the box serve and make the first volley, but then ultimately let my opponent kind of have control of the point as opposed to taking it myself. So I wish I would have done more of that because I'm also cautious by nature, but it's a great concept. And one that I think guys like I hear like Dominic Thiem speak, right? He's been over hitting since he was a kid, and look at the what he can generate from the back now because of that.
Right. If you practice it enough, I guess you can figure it out.
Yeah.
So now you're working with the USTA. You've been with them for like 3 or 4 years now. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. And what's your role with the USTA?
So I'm the director of pro tennis operations and player relations, long title. Essentially was brought in kind of right off the court when I retired in 2016. They had a great tournament director at the time, David Brewer, and I was working with him. And they just wanted someone who was really kind of had an ear to the ground on the player side of things, and then eventually kind of moved into sort of overseeing the whole player operation. So anything that a player interfaces with, it could be the locker rooms, the fitness centers, the practice desk, working with the food and beverage, the transportation, some of those kind of outside vendors that we have, things like that. And then over the last couple of years is really as my business knowledge has increased, and I can kind of continue to expand that portfolio and do a little bit more for the organization. But I think they just sort of realized that they didn't have anyone who was an ex-player on the U.S. Open side of things. They had ex-players who were coaches or in player development, but no one was really working on the U.S. Open, which was very much kind of where my interest was, and I was looking to learn and grow. And I've fallen into a great spot where I think I provide tremendous value to the organization, but also I'm doing just a ton of learning and getting up to speed on what an event of that magnitude is. It's been such a unbelievable, just kind of last 3-4 years. And then last year being my 4th year, we had a new tournament director, Stacey Allister, who's actually been with the company since I've been here. She's been the chief executive of Pro Tennis but to be working with her as we tried to, navigate the COVID world and be, really one of the first tennis tournaments to come back was
Right.
pushed me to my limits of sort of what I could
Yeah.
handle. As far as working hours, getting up at 5 so we could do calls with, the tours based in Europe and things like that, working till midnight, and just really pushed to the limits, both on hours that we were working to put in, but also the stress of it all, just because you're juggling player health, financials, the good of the game, and every decision is kind of, you're looking at it through like 3 different lenses. And if you don't really
Right.
tick all 3 of those boxes, you can't be moving forward in a year like 2020. And so then when you have that, and then with the landscape constantly changing, right? Number of cases, what the state is going to allow you to do, who the federal government is going to allow into the country. It
Yeah.
was really, really stressful. But also, I mean, a lot of people say, like, the best things in life are on the other side of sort of pain and stress, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
it's one of the things I feel most accomplished, in my career, right? To have been part of the team that put on the 2020 U.S. Open. It wasn't
Right.
perfect. There were challenges all along the way. Frankly, it was downright depressing to sit in there and watch some of the night matches, with 2 people in the stadium. Like, it was rough. But
Yeah.
ultimately, just to kind of set out with a goal, we're gonna try to make this happen, and then to have pulled it off, it was a pretty awesome experience.
Yeah. Yeah, from our perspective, thank you. Like, it was, even though there was only a few fans, I was so excited personally to be watching tennis again.
And
Yeah.
we got a lot of those messages, and that it helped a lot, because during the day you had all the players on the suites, and I felt like, for the day matches, that gave it a bit of gravitas, and a
Yeah,
lot
that
of
was
other
cool.
players would grab their lunch and,
Yeah.
sit in the stadium and watch it, and you'd be like, oh, this is really
Zverev was
cool.
always sitting on his massage table. Like, that was so funny.
He lived on that massage
Yeah.
table.
Yeah.
But the night matches were rough. I mean, we would sit in there with just a couple of us in an empty stadium, just because what it should be like, and
Right.
you miss the energy and the
Yeah.
enthusiasm. So honestly, all the messages from the fans who are like still enjoying the tennis at home, it was helpful.
Yeah.
And fingers crossed, we're back to some semblance of normalcy.
Yeah.
In 21.
So, let's go back a little bit. So, how did you mentioned that you grew up with tennis and your dad was a coach? Is that right?
Yep.
Tell us the story of how you kind of got started in tennis, like where you grew up through college, and then how you ended up with doubles.
Yeah, try to give you the Cliff Note version. So, yeah, my dad was kind of runs the tennis club in Rochester, Minnesota. So I was pretty, obviously going to the club all summer long, playing a lot of tennis. Uh, got to about 12 years old, I think I was, and I was, one of the better kids now in the state of Minnesota, and
Mhm.
had sort of a, just epiphany one day, and just realized, like, I don't like playing tennis. Um, was crying after all my losses, worried about the rankings, and, a lot of things that typical kids go through in junior
Yeah.
tennis. Ultimately, I remember telling my dad that I wanted to quit, which, he met with and said, no problem at all. Let's find something else, and was super supportive of that. And took 2 years off of really playing competitive tennis, but pretty quickly kind of found my way back to the tennis club, started playing high school tennis, and then came back really like in the 16s division and started playing like really competitively there, and made it to some
Mhm.
national tournaments. Wasn't recruited by many schools, ended up going to Ball State as a walk-on. I did a year and a half there, and had a good experience. I was kind of in and out of the lineup, playing 5, 6, 7, kind of really very much what I was looking for out of a school.
Mhm.
Realized that I didn't like being sort of on the edge of the lineup for teams. I think, like many kids, I was like, oh, I need to be around better players, and that's going to make me better, and want to work my way onto the squad, and I really kind of did that. I was playing most of the matches, but found there's a ton of stress in that. All week long you're like kind of defending your roster spot, and you're
Yeah.
worried about, are you going to get a scholarship or are you not? And so after a year and a half, transferred to Gustavus, which is where my dad had actually gone to school. Both my parents went to school, and my dad had played for this coach Steve Wilkinson, who was one of the maybe the winningest coach in college tennis history. So
Wow.
a guy that I had been very close with for many years, sort of like a second father to my dad. Um, and went in, and it was sort of again, totally life-changing to be around him. You know, outside my parents, he was the person in the world that I was closest to. You know, would routinely go over to his house in the evenings to, you know, talk tennis, help me with homework, whatever. Always my first call from the road if any sort of big victory, or more importantly, you know, a doubles partner would dump me, or, you know, sort of a tough moment on the road. He was the guy who I would always call. So that was, you know, sort of really what he was, sort of the first guy who I felt like was my really kind of special, close connection when it comes to my tennis development, and put me on this path of like just focusing on, you know, becoming a better tennis player, and not stressing about wins and losses, and looking at through it, you know, through a very different lens. So I feel so lucky to have been around him. He unfortunately passed away about 5 years ago. But just the years that I got to be close to him was really what put me on the journey and out onto the tour.
Very cool. So when did you realize that you were going to make it in doubles? When did you kind of transition from singles? I assume you started as a singles player. That's what everybody does, right? So.
Yeah, I think I always knew I was better at doubles. So I went over to play money tournaments in France. There's an Australian guy named Gareth Keating working for my dad, who was just out of college. He played at Indiana State. He had another friend who was living over in Europe playing money tournaments in France. So over the course of a few months working for my dad, he convinced me to, you know, get a passport and get myself organized. I wanted to be a high school teacher. And he said, no, we're going to go to France. And when my friends got it figured out over there, this guy named Will, he speaks French. He can enter us in these tournaments. You know, the way they schedule their events there, it's sort of like the UTR is probably the closest concept they have, but you basically come in based on your ranking. They maybe play someone worse than you in your first match, and then better in the second round. So the tournament could last a couple weeks, and you come in at the appropriate point. So we were playing like 3 tournaments per week. You literally would like play 2 days, drive to the next city, play 2 days, drive next city, play 2 days. And it was just a whirlwind, like few months. Those guys both ran out of money. And I played a guy named Peter Popovich, who is now coaching on tour. You see him coaching Damir Džumhur. Before that, he was with Karlovic, Petkovic, Krajinovic. The guy ripped his shirt off in Paris Masters when Krajinovic won the semifinal a couple years ago. Crazy Serbian guy. So he beats me in a money tournament in Plaisir, France, and literally grabs me in the parking lot when I was packing up my car and maybe ready to come home and quit tennis, and says, hey, there's a future starting here in a couple of days. We should play doubles. And I'm like, God.
You played him in singles?
I played him in singles in the money tournament. He beat me 5-3. And he said, we should play doubles in this future. And I was like, look, I don't have a ranking. I don't even know how to sign in for these things. I've heard you have to have a singles ranking to get in. And he goes, no, it's France. Like, they may not even fill the draw. Like, you know, we can probably get in. So we sign up, we get in. I qualify for the singles, lose first round, and we win the doubles. So I'm like, what do we do now? And he's like, we go play again next week. So we literally drove right to the next tournament, same deal. Get in. I think I might have lost in qualies and singles, and we win the doubles again. So right out of the gates, I had 48 doubles points, and I was ranked 600 in the world in 2 tournaments. Wow. Now, I think at that point, I kind of realized, like, okay, if I'm ever going to make it in anything, it's probably going to be doubles. Now, fast forward a year of playing futures tournaments, and I'm ranked 600 in the world in doubles and still don't have a singles point. So like, that was kind of like my real, like, wow, okay, this is maybe going to be a little harder than I thought. It's not going to be just like a charge to the top. Right. So it took a good couple of years of really kind of pounding, getting a singles point. And then after about maybe 3 years on tour, maybe 2 years on tour, I was, I think, 935 in singles and 185 in doubles. And that was sort of like the realization that if I want to go any higher in doubles, I got to go start playing challenger events, and then I'm not going to get in singles anymore.
Yeah.
Now I'm all in on the doubles. Started playing a lot with a guy named Chris Drake, who's now the coach at Yale, and really sort of focused, you know, all in on doubles. And if I could get into qualies and singles, great. But that was where my singles sort of just fell off, and I focused all on the doubles. And it was about a year after that, I think, that I then, you know, made it into Grand Slams.
Okay, got it. Wow. So it was a long, long process with a lot of work. It sounds.
And that's what I tell I literally get a call almost every year from the kid who wins the D3 nationals, or someone who's, you know, high in D3. And they're like, can you tell me like how did you do it? Give me the blueprint. I'm like, all right, I'll give you the blueprint of how I did it. It's not the only way, but it's a way. And I kind of like lay it out, like I would do this, then I would do this, and then this, and then this, and this, and this. And they're sort of like, so wait a minute, it's going to take like 3 to 4 years to get to a Grand Slam. I'm like, well, if you're lucky, like, like no,
do
like
everything right and get lucky, then yes, 3 to 4
and
years.
you are good, and your game keeps developing. Like, it's but it's pro sports, right? If it was easy, everybody would do it. Like, it's not,
Right.
and you have to be lucky, and you have to be good, and you have to be driven. It's going to take time, but that's also what makes it so special. And that's like, even if you go and quote unquote fail or don't make it to a Grand Slam, just even going for it and seeing how good you can get, there's success in that. There's value in that,
Right.
that will make you stronger, for later in life.
Well, I would think like one of the things that allowed you to do it was because you felt like satisfied every day with these small goals, right? Like if your goal from the get-go was like, if I don't make a Grand Slam, I'm gonna fail, I would bet you probably don't make it, because
Yeah.
a year in you're probably like, I'm still not any closer to the Grand Slam, I'm still at 600. So setting those like small goals probably helped you
Yeah. And I'm not going to say
endure
that,
like the hardships.
and because there are hardships, right? And I'm not going to say that when I flew to France and lost first round, got in a car, drove to Portugal, lost first round, flew to Belgium, didn't get in the tournament, that I was like, hey, still going great. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
there were plenty of days where I was like, geez, am I in the wrong line of work?
Right.
Because there's really, I'm sure there's plenty of pain in other sports, maybe that involve getting cut from teams and whatnot, but like, to fly to 24 hours to Kuala Lumpur, to lose in the first round in 45 minutes, and then fly 9 hours to Tokyo and lose again in the first round a week later, and then fly 3 hours to Shanghai, lose in the first round, and fly home. Like, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's really rough. So like, it's a hard sport. And you go back to empty hotel rooms in foreign countries. And when I was doing it, it was pre-Wi-Fi. We were going to internet cafes. I was watching TV in French and reading books and writing in journals, and it was hard.
Yeah, it's a more lonely sport probably, I would say, than other sports, for
Yep.
sure. So what would you say? Let's get into a little bit of double strategy. So, do you coach at all now?
Not much. Just some of those guys, some of the pro players who might come through the New York area.
Okay.
I'll get on court with them and help out.
Okay.
But I'm not out there regularly now.
Okay, got it. So do you watch any like USTA level, like club level tennis?
Sure.
A little bit. Okay. So what advice would you give as far as strategy for people around that, like say 4.0 USTA level? What mistakes do you see? What things do they need to work on? What do they need to avoid?
Whew. I mean, it's tough to say like a exact trend that I'm seeing. You have to look at kind of each one individually. But the thing that I always encourage, I said a little bit earlier, I talked about like the psychological aspect, but there's also sort of a skill aspect to it, to understand that like in doubles, you have two people working together. And I think so often people are so fixated on, trying to play a certain way, as opposed to realizing, all right, if we're a team, what are the assets we have and what are the weaknesses that we have, right? And let's try to hide those weaknesses as much as we can, and let's play the points on our strengths. And that's before you even get into the other side of the court and kind of analyzing, what that team might be doing poorly. But I think even at the like lowest levels, it's like if there's a weak shot on the court, someone's got a backhand that's absolute crap, right? Like my backhand's not great. I was a pro player. Like if you're going to be a 4-0, someone's going to have a bad shot. How do you hide that shot? Like, where do you put that shot on the court that it can basically be covered up by maybe your partner's good shot, right? Mm-hmm. And then starting to understand, okay, my partner is a weaker net player. So if my partner is a weaker net player, I might want to serve 20% more aggressively than I normally do. And that might lead to 2 extra double faults, but that's a lot better than my partner being attacked at the net all day and missing volleys, and me having bad body language because they're missing volleys.
Right.
So just really starting to look at, like, that's what gets me charged up, is sort of like the puzzle that is tennis. And I think
Yeah.
that came from, watching matches with my dad as a kid, and, the two of us analyzing them. But I feel like even at a 3-5 or 4-0 level, like, you can look at kind of what you have to work with here, and how do you make the best of what you've got, right?
Right.
And there's the psychological component of sort of accepting this is my partner, and then, treating them as well as I can, to get the best out of them. And then there's also there's the strategic side of, okay, who should play which side? Where do we need to put our weak shot to kind of guard against it? Who should serve first? Should we play two back? Should we play up? Are we the team that's going to try to get to the net all the time, or are we the kind of team that's going to stay back? And
Yeah.
even these little basic strategies, they can be changed throughout a match. And
Sure.
watching certain players play, or even like some of the college tennis that I've watched, and watching a team lose with a certain style for the entire match just kills me. And it's
Right.
like, no, you guys just played,
Try
6
something
games.
different.
Try something different.
Yeah.
Like there's, I don't know, things like that. Just
Yeah.
so that it's unfortunately, I feel like, I don't want to sound arrogant coming out like that, that I think about it at such a deep level that sometimes when I talk to people, they're
Yeah.
like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Yeah.
I just need to know if I
Just need
should
the
hit cross court.
basics.
Should I hit cross court or down the line? I'm like,
Right.
like, I don't know. Like, honestly, I've dove too deep. I'm like the Harvard
Yeah.
professor who's gone to like a nuance of a certain topic that I can't even
Yeah.
speak broadly anymore.
Well, I think that's where it comes back to like knowing your partner, right? Like uh like when I'm playing doubles matches, there's some partners who I know are super into the strategy and they want all of it. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, like let's do it. Like when they're both at the net, we're going at that guy's backhand volley because that's the weakest volley on the court. When there's one back, like we're pushing that guy back and we're coming in, I'm giving them every single thing. And then there's definitely other people I'll play with who like you'll confuse them. So it's just like, hey, let's
Mhm.
just play solid like fundamentals cross court, and like I'll worry about the strategy, when the ball comes to me.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I even had that on in my pro career, right, where I had, some of the doubles players that I would play with. We would have, sessions the night before. We'd analyze footage of our opponents. We'd have like a detailed, even, here's the first few plays that we're going to call of every game, right? And then when I might play with Sam Query, I played with him a bunch of times. Amazing player,
Mhm.
right? But like, he's not going to want to watch any footage. He's not going to want to hear all this. And like, frankly, he's going to want to have a good time. And if he's not going to have a
Yeah.
good time with me on the court, he's not going to want to play with me again. So I have
Right.
to like totally adapt sort of my, doubles game to fit with him. And how do I maximize his serve and his forehand and his just general shot making ability, put
Right.
him in the right place without overwhelming him with information.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So let's go through an example. So let's say you and I are going out to play a doubles match. The weakest shot on the court is going to be my backhand. How would we go about hiding that?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I mean, I guess the first thing would be is depends like if you can return on your backhand or not, right? So, like if you have a weak backhand, and that also applies to the return, I would always put you in the deuce court, right? Because as the
Okay.
deuce court, being a righty, that way your backhand's in the middle, and you can return primarily with your forehand. And if they go out wide, you can chase it down with the stretch forehand, right?
Sure.
Then,
Okay.
as me playing the ad side, let's say I'm a balanced player, right, that has good strokes
Mhm.
on both, like I can play much closer to the middle of the court to protect your backhand, right? If you're a
Right.
good returner, I can play up, and so basically you're only going to hit forehands cross court, right? You're never going to hit a backhand, and I'm going to squeeze the middle. And then if we're two back, I'm going to just know that I'm going to stand a little closer to you, and I'm going to take as many balls as I can, and your backhand's not really in play. You're literally just going to hit forehands either in your comfort zone or on the run.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So you're kind of helping your partner by covering that middle, any of those
Mhm.
middle balls and protecting their backhand that way. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So, what were your biggest strengths and weaknesses as a doubles player?
So I mean, obviously, for all the tactics we've already talked. I mean, I think I understood the game, as well as just about anyone. So I think I just had a good sense for what's happening, and scouting opponents and kind of building a game plan and trying to execute, adapt, etc. I think being around Louis Kaye and Jamie Murray for those like early, really my first full year on tour, just helped me a ton as how to be a server's partner. And I think being a service partner is so much about understanding the geometry of the court. It's obviously, knowing where your partner is serving is really, I feel like, the key to everything, right? Because I have a piece of information that the returner doesn't. So, I line up in a certain position. I'm going to move, forward and probably to a certain area of the court. And frankly, I already know where I'm going to volley if the ball comes to me based off of where my partner called to serve. So if my partner is, let's say, a right-handed server on the deuce court, and he calls a wide serve, I know that I'm going to move forward, but also a little bit out to cover my alley, and I'm going to volley through the middle. There's going to be a wide, opening through the middle of the court. If my partner is going to serve T, I know that I'm going to close forward a little bit to the center, and I'm going to volley to the returner's alley. Whether it's a forehand, backhand, whatever, I'm going to finish it. That's where the finishing shot's going to be. So obviously, I got very good at being that server's partner, but people ask me all the time, they're like, man, your partner served 120 and the return was 90 miles an hour and you put it away clean for a winner at the net. Like, how did you do that? And I'm like, well, it's all at that point just like stimulus response. Because I knew back when he told me where the serve's going, I had already played out the first, 3 shots in my head. So when I'm lining up, like I'm kind of doing that little visualization process. So, so then when it all happens at lightning speed, I already know exactly, there's no time to make a real decision. It's just all pre-programmed and automatic. So once you nail down that philosophy, then you can get into, eye formations and moving to certain positions, different types of fakes, whether it's like a fake and still go, a racket fake, a head fake. I'm constantly trying to just mess with the returner as to where I'm going to pop out. And when you have use of things like eye formation and regular, and frankly, my best years were with Julian Roger and Raven Klassen, who were 2 unbelievably accurate servers who could hit serves with different types of spins. So they were both smaller guys. They weren't taller than 6 feet, but they could hit kick serves, they could hit slice serves, and they could put the ball exactly where we called it. And for me, that was just the dream partner to be with, because it just allowed me to just be like a rangy left-handed net man who was constantly disrupting up there. And frankly, I was actually better playing with those types of players than I was when I played with, say, Rajiv Ram, who might go out and hit 4 aces in a game, but then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a ball gets fired at me at the net, and I haven't touched one for 2 games because he's hit a bunch of service winners. And so you're a little out of rhythm. So I really enjoyed, those partners who could put the ball exactly where we set it, and we could just run just so many different types of plays, using their serve, and then basically designing every serve to be where the returner would be hitting the ball directly at me, ideally. So forcing them to hit the spots that they didn't want to hit if they wanted to get it around me. So that was probably my biggest strength as a player, is just sort of kind of my ability to help my partner hold serve.
So regardless of whether you get a forehand or backhand volley up there, you're going to the same spot? Like
mostly. I mean, there's times where you maybe, instead of going inside out with a forehand, you just swipe it across your body for an easy finish.
Sure.
But at that point, your reactions just take over and you just do it. But I mean, with all this stuff, you drill it you have so many hours to practice this stuff, that you get so good at being able to direct the ball, especially when you're close to the net, at these very tricky, tough angles. You watch someone like a Mike Bryan play. He's one of the best in the world at sort of being tight on the net and being able to just redirect the ball off the court any number of directions.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So you mentioned match prep and kind of game planning. What was your process for that? Like before, let's say the night before a match or the morning of a match. How did you get ready?
It varied over the 10 years that I was on the tour. In an ideal world, I tried to have the match prep the night before with my partner, depending on who that was. With a guy like Raven Klassen, who I had success with in Australia that one year, and for all of 2014, I think it was. We really tried our best to basically have the the session to go over our match the night before, so that when you wake up on match day, you can really focus on just getting your body ready, and then you walk out to practice and you're like naturally practicing. And as you're warming up, I have in my head the couple things that are going to be key for me. He has them in his mind, so we can really kind of go about our day, as opposed to having to sit down and have a real strategy session like the day of the match. But the kid doesn't always work out that way. You could have finished late the night before. Your opponents did, they played the night before, so you don't really have time to do it. It doesn't always work that way. But definitely a time set aside where you're going to sit down and make sure you're both on the same page, is sort of, hey, what's the game plan here? The key is, what's their weakness, what's our strength, and how can we play the majority of the match, in that area. When I played against Rafa once at Indian Wells, and it was Rafa and Feliciano Lopez, and a coach was just like, look, Rafa's going to serve and stay back, and like, you've got a couple options. You can return and get to the net, you can return right at Lopez, or maybe you can put up a lob and try to sneak in, but I don't want you rallying with Rafa at all. Like, literally, like, if you try to rally with Rafa, you're doing two things wrong. One, you're going to lose the point nearly every time, and two, you're giving him rhythm, right?
Right.
We know that from baseline to baseline, Rafa is going to destroy me. We know that if Rafa's at the net and I'm at the back, it's not an amazing situation, but it's not terrible either, right? If Rafa's back and I'm at the net, again, not amazing, not terrible. If we're both at the net, that's maybe ideal for me. But it's like, so how can I play the most amount of the match in sort of a doubles, all of at the net scenario, or with him backing me up or him up and me back? But we are not engaging in him back and me back, because that's just a losing philosophy. So just kind of going through that process and just making sure you're on the same page, that like, hey, we know if I get caught back because it's a huge first serve and he hits a heavy forehand, I'm just tagging the next ball at Lopez. I'm not even gonna, because at deuce, I want to hit a return cross court and come to the net. I don't want him to have any rhythm. I don't want to have had a 20 ball exchange right before that and feel like his forehand's dialed in. I want him to feel like he hasn't even hit a forehand all game, and it's a deuce. So things like that. Yeah.
So for the pre-match session that you said you'd prefer to do the night before, what did that look like? Did y'all watch film, or did you have like notes from previous matches, or what specifically did you do?
I mean, I think the film wasn't as readily available probably early in my career. I think nowadays you can get access to a lot more matches, especially even like the challenger levels and stuff. You can always find like a replayed stream of the match. So we were doing it a lot off of notes. If I had a coach with me, which I did some of the time, they would often chart the match before, chart our opponent's match. They would give us maybe some serving trends, so kind of an expectation of what we're going to see from each of the players who are serving to us. So you just get a kind of lead on where they're going to serve on big points and what their favorite serves are, what formations are they going to run, so I know what type of return I'm going to be looking to practice. But all those little things, so that when you do have your practice the morning of the match, I know that I'm going to need my down the line return backhand. So I'm going to hit 10 of them in warm-ups. Right. You know what I mean? Things like that.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So a few more questions before we get into the rapid fire. So you're with USTA now. You were on the Players Council for a while. Something I've talked about with a few other guests and that I'm super interested in is why is it that doubles isn't as popular as it seemingly should be, since the majority of tennis players, at least in the US, play doubles? And what can we do to help grow the game of doubles on a professional level and a fan level and so on?
Yeah, I mean, that was a question that I heard a lot, right? And it's, I would play these tournaments, especially in the States, and you'd meet with fans and after the match, and they'd be like, "Why isn't there more doubles on TV? It's so good, it's so good." Then I got older and got exposed to people who sent the CEO of the tennis channel, and I would ask those questions, right? Like, why are you not showing more doubles? And he showed me numbers. Like, here's the viewership when we show doubles. Here's the viewership when we show a replayed, not live singles match. It's like, oh wow, there's people actually aren't watching it. So we got to figure out a way to make the product better, right? And I guess the quick and easy fix would be to get more stars to play, Like, I do think that when you watch the Laver Cup and you see doubles, when you watch Davis Cup and you see doubles, when you see these guys like Federer and Nadal against, Sock and Query, like, I don't think we're struggling for eyeballs on those matches.
Right.
They're unbelievable, right? When you see a Davis Cup or an Olympics, and the biggest personalities in sport, in tennis, are playing doubles together, I think it's magic, right? They love seeing them interact.
Right.
So I think, one, what can we do to get them to want to play? That would be really, really huge for but that would have to be like a whole restructuring of the tour and figuring out a way to make the rankings important, make it financially worth it for them. So that's the big one. From a doubles player perspective, I do think that the collective doubles group needs to do a better job of understanding that they're there to entertain. The Bryan brothers were the ultimate example. I mean, I thanked them so many times, because not only, like, they were the Tiger Woods for people like me, right? Doubles almost got canceled back in like 2005. There was a thing where the ATP was going to move to a singles only tour, and the Bryans like helped, pay for a lawsuit and ended up kind of keeping doubles around. So they kept it alive, and they set an example for how to entertain, how to sign every autograph, how to high five every fan. They were the ultimate role models for how to, carry yourselves on tour and build a fan base. Now without them, I worry that there won't be someone there leading the torch, because unfortunately there are a number of doubles players who are out there just like collecting a check, and they think that they are entitled to X number of dollars because they made it the semifinals of a tournament. And then they're not really thinking about it big picture, where it's like, okay, the money comes in because fans and sponsors and television pay to see this content, and then it's distributed through the tournament format, and because you made the semis, that's your share. But it's like, if you're not putting on a good show, if you're not entertaining to watch, if you're not high-fiving that fan or signing that autograph afterwards, like, that really hurts the collective group. So I would love to see some sort of change in, I don't know how they compensate players by, building their brands, or, you're compensated in a way other than just reaching a certain round. Golf does an unbelievable job with their pro-ams, and that's how they generate so much money. And I know we tried that a little bit with tennis. It doesn't work quite as well, but I was one of the guys who helped, but you still have people who will pay a lot of money to be part of the pro-ams. And we did it for a few years while I was on tour, and I was one of the leaders of sort of pushing that through. But we had a number of the players who they would just no show for the pro-am each week. And we would try to threaten them with different things, but they didn't want to be there. And frankly, if they went, they were bad to have around. So it's like, we need to do a better job with our sport of being engaging, entertaining, putting on an awesome product. I don't know. I wish the product sold itself, of doubles, because I think it can be fun, but it's not going to sell itself, right? It's not if people aren't fun. And there are some really great teams out there. Cabal and Farah are really fun to watch, right? They're number one in the world. They're sponsored by the same clothing line. They're both from the same country. They play with a ton of energy. They came to the U.S. Open last year in 2019. And for the finals, I was able to do something, because the doubles final is so much earlier than the singles final. I said, hey, if you guys want extra tickets, I can get you basically as many tickets as you want for the doubles match only. And I'll give them to you for free, and we'll just try to fill the lower bowl, right? And I offered it to the other team as well. And Cabal, I gave him 500 tickets. And Rob called me in like an hour. He's like, done. Can I get more? And if you see the photos from that doubles final, there's Colombian soccer jerseys and people screaming, going mad. Like, okay, there's a team who is really like putting out an awesome product, and there are a few others out there like that in tour. But unfortunately, if the doubles world was full of 8 teams like Cabal, Farah, I think you would have a world tour finals that was really electric and amazing, and fans wanted to follow. But as players chop and change and new partner every week, and don't really have their own brands, don't engage that much, it's not as easy to get behind Kubat and Melo as it is Cabal and Farah. They don't dress the same. They don't really engage with each other. One's from Poland, one's from Brazil. They're both fine guys, but they're not high energy. They don't bounce around the way Cabal and Farah do. So it's a tougher product to sell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a complex issue. It's kind of like a chicken or the egg problem, right? It's like
Yeah,
we need a team like the Bryan brothers with more energy and signing more autographs, but we also need like probably some better, branding and promotion and stuff
hmm
like that, and they kind of go hand in hand.
they
Um,
do. And I mean, Danny Nestor is a really good friend of mine, right? And people
mhm.
and people would come watch him play, like, oh my god, that guy's so boring, kind of, no energy, slumping his shoulders. Daniel Nestor on the practice court is like the funniest guy on tour. He talks
Yeah.
so much trash. He's always in your face. He tries to hit you with a high ball. I'm like, Danny, man, if you played your matches the way you practiced, like you would
Right.
be like a hero. Like what? He's just like, nah, it's not me, man.
Huh.
This is, you
Because
know.
once there's like some money involved, it can kind of
Yeah,
change your
and some people
personality
just
a
don't
little
have
bit.
that gear, right? You can't ask people to
Yeah.
be someone they're not. So
Sure.
it's not a totally fair ask of everyone either.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes a
So,
ton of sense.
but I had some creative ideas when I was back on the player council that never were able to get through. One was where players get like a salary for the week, and so basically a doubles player has to come. If you play on Monday and you lose, you have to come Tuesday and Wednesday and work, like do a pro-am, do a clinic, whatever, and you're like
Hmm.
paid half your compensation is prize money, and the other half is kind of you being at the event and being hands-on at those types of events. That was one. And
Interesting.
then another one was to basically pull some of the doubles compensation out of every single week and put it into like a year-end like ranking bonus that was
Hmm.
only paid out via teams. So like basically if you were that
Hmm.
player who was playing with someone new every week, you weren't going to be in the top 25 teams at the year end. But if you stuck with your
Interesting.
partner, like you would get that $50,000 or whatever, that a really big number at the end of the year by
Yeah.
staying the course with your partner, because I think there's a lot of branding that goes in with putting those two players together. But
Wow.
ultimately wasn't able to really get either. But I think those are some of the types of, and those are just two thought starters, right? But
Sure.
those are the types of ideas that like the structure has to change and then the players have to buy into it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, because fans are going to root for probably a particular doubles team, right? Like the Bryan
Yep.
brothers or
Yep.
Cabal and Farah.
Yep.
Or and then the thing before that is they need to know these players, right? So getting
Yeah.
them to stick around and hang out with fans, and it'll start with the biggest fans, the biggest tennis fans who are going to these tournaments and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the tennis channel TV stuff would probably ultimately follow that. Numbers would start to tick up and things like that. But
But nowadays with social media,
anyways,
it's so easy to start building that. And I tell
sure,
some of those guys in challengers, even like, guys, you got to be posting and tagging the
yeah,
tournament, and the tournament will tag you back, and you pick up 10 followers here and 20 at the next and 30 at the next, and that gets rolling. And
right,
everyone's got a story, right? I told you a bit about mine. I'm the kid who played D3 from Minnesota, and I'm kind of a doubles geek, and I also like the
yeah,
business side of the sport. That's my story, right? Someone
sure,
else might be the party guy. Someone else might be the Hunter Reese. He loves going on hikes. He's a vegan. He's got all kinds of cool, like, he's
sure,
a really deep thinker. He's got tattoos. He's all, like, but like
yeah,
put that out there, like, sell your story. So, when you
yeah,
do make it to 50, 60 in the world, like you've got a following and people want to
right,
engage with you, because social makes it much more easy, but there's still work that, the athlete has to put in to kind of get
right,
that ball rolling. Look at a guy like Nick Monroe. He's always posting. He's always out there. Now the guy's
sure,
commentating on the tennis channel while he's playing on tour. He's
yeah,
charismatic. He's a good speaker. He's
yeah.
got a
He's doing
cool
a great job.
story. He's doing a great
Yeah,
job. And what a great
yeah,
commentator, right? He knows these guys. He played with Tommy Paul at Roland Garros, and he's commentating on his match the next week. Like
right,
it's great
right.
content. He's
Yeah, it
doing the
is.
so.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, if the fans could like get to know them on a little bit deeper, kind of personal level, like, I mean, I would be, if I learned that some doubles player was like super into hiking and camping and stuff, like that's something I'm into. So like, I would probably get behind that and like go
Yeah,
watch them next time at a tournament and
yeah.
stuff like that. So,
And I
um,
tried. I should have leaned on the D3 angle even more, right? Think about how many
yeah,
D3 tennis players are out there. And
yeah,
every tournament I would go to in the States, I would have people come up and introduce themselves and say, "Oh, my coach told your story to us at the beginning of the season," and like
yeah,
and I did lean on that, but like I could have leaned on it more. That was
sure,
and really had
sure.
that be like my people. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
so
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's finish up with some rapid fire questions. So what's your favorite tennis book?
Oh man, I think Open with Andre Agassi,
Yeah.
just
Okay.
because I barely got to meet him at the end of my career, and his stuff was just fascinating. I wouldn't be as interested to read something about Federer or Nadal because I lived with them on tour. I know those guys, but to
Okay.
the way he openly shared, he was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good book. What's your favorite non-tennis book?
Non-tennis book, fiction, Jack Kerouac, On the Road. Non-fiction, I'm reading right now this book that I love called Boundless by Ben Greenfield. It's all about like defying aging and living the healthiest life possible.
Cool. What was your favorite tournament to play in?
Favorite tournament was Stockholm. Second favorite would be Queens.
What was your favorite pre-match meal?
Um, I wasn't that picky, so
Yeah.
something simple, chicken, rice. Yeah.
Okay. What
Always,
about
always, always an espresso. Always coffee before I was.
okay.
Always caffeine.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I have there's like a threshold for me with caffeine, so I can have like maybe three quarters of a cup of coffee and I'll like play great. But sometimes I'll have like 2 cups and I'll get out there and be like jittery and play really bad.
I've yet to meet my threshold, but I think
Yeah.
there's a dehydration component that I was always concerned about.
Sure, there's that too.
Yeah.
What about a post-match meal or maybe like after you won a big match? Like, what was your favorite meal?
Um, Nothing favorite. I love traveling the world. I love being in Asia. I love being in Europe. So,
Yeah.
I was a big fan of trying to figure out whatever that country does the best. Whether
Hmm.
it's Wiener Schnitzel in Vienna or it's pad Thai in Bangkok. Like I would seek out. Give me the best local cuisine you
Sure.
have.
Cool. Um, what is tell us a tennis story that you've never told anyone.
Oh man, I don't have anything
It's
off
a
the top of
tough
my
one.
head. Yeah, I've never told it.
Or something you haven't told many people. Or just your
Uh,
favorite tennis story.
I don't have many that I've never told because I feel like I have a lot of stories and I tell them all the time. My favorite tennis story is my first year on the player council. Was when I got nominated, and so was with Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic. So
Mhm.
obviously, being 25 years old, I didn't really know these guys, and I'm in a boardroom, 8 times a year with them, essentially as equals, right?
Yeah.
And hard didn't speak for a couple meetings, and then the topic of blue clay in Madrid came up, and the
Mhm.
CEO at the time, Adam Helfant, like walked into the room, and we had some materials that we'd been sent in advance, and I read all the materials always, and he was like, "All right, so first topic is blue clay at Madrid. Tiriac wants to try to pass this through. What are some initial thoughts?" And he looks at me, he's like, "Eric, you go first." And I was like, "Oh,
And you hadn't
a
spoken the previous
yeah, I
meetings.
mean, well, I don't know. I don't even know if I'd opened my mouth. Maybe I had,
Yeah.
but like I was not an active participant in like Nadal and Federer
Sure.
deciding the fate of the player side of the tour, right?
Yeah.
So I said something. I think I mumbled something along the lines of like, well, if you can see the ball better and they say it plays the same, like I think it's worth a try, you know. And
Mhm.
Adam was like on the little whiteboard. It's like, okay, that's one yes. And then Rafa was next to me, and they're like, Rafa, what do you think? And he says, first of all clay should be red. And then he went on some like tirade in Spanish, and our Spanish board rep, like we all kind of looked to him for translation because at the time Rafa sometimes would still say stuff and wanted it translated. So we all looked to Giorgio, and he goes, Rafa votes no. It's like, all right. And then Djokovic goes next, and Djokovic goes, last year in Madrid, there was a blue clay court, like a sample court that they had built, and I hit on it, and it's slippery and dangerous. So I vote no. And I'm like, I didn't even get into Madrid last year. I had no idea there was a sample court. Like, I certainly don't want to vote for anything dangerous. Now I'm putting players' health and safety at risk
Right.
with my vote, you know. So then Federer goes next, and Federer goes, I think blue clay is actually a good idea. And I was like, oh, thank God. And then he goes, and then we should bring out the clowns and elephants and have a circus on the court. And there was like, Query was there. He voted no. You know, Ashley Fisher voted no. Everyone voted no. So like 9-1. And I saw Query and Fisher
Like to
after.
change my answer, please.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to the end, and like after the meeting, Ashley and Sam came over to me and they were like, man, Eric, we were both going to say yes. But once it got to us, there was no chance. It was like already like 6-1. I was like, yeah. So I mean, that was my sort of like welcome to opening my mouth moment on the ATP Player Council. But there was nowhere to go but up from that point. That's for sure.
That's really good. That's so funny.
So
awesome. Well, thanks, Eric, for hopping on, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, my pleasure. All the best, Will. Take care.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye.
If you liked that video, be sure to click the thumbs up button below to help support the channel. And for even more gear reviews, double strategies, and interviews with pro tennis players and coaches, don't forget to subscribe to our channel as well. And to sign up for our newsletter where you'll get double strategies and discounts on the latest tennis gear, go to thetennistribe.com.